Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the amazing people across the great state of Mississippi who are working in the trenches to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. Listen, one of the people who was working in the trenches for a long time was our dear friend Paul Gallo. We've had a couple of shows focused on his enormous contributions to Mississippi. Attending his memorial service last week, I said to you, our listeners, and I've written about it, that I sat there for 2 hours listening to so many of his friends memorialize him, and I could have sat there for 2 more hours because what I was learning about him, about his contributions to this state, his contributions to SuperTalk Mississippi media, was I was hearing things I hadn't heard before. I knew the overall story, but to hear some of the details and hear the passion and to really understand the kind of father and grandfather he was and husband and the kind of person he was, which I had the opportunity to get to know as someone who had the opportunity to work with him, arm in arm at times. Paul was an amazing guy. We're shifting gears now, and Richard Cross has been named the new. Actually, I shouldn't say replacing Paul because really it's a new show, Mornings with Richard Cross. And Richard, before we get started, first of all, good morning, Richard. Thank you for joining me today.
Ricky, always a pleasure to be with you. I appreciate you having me.
So let me something I posted on social media this morning as it relates to you and what I think is a terrific hitting the ground running that you've done. But here's what I said. I said, Richard will do an excellent job. Watching him honor Paul Gallo at Paul's memorial was an opportunity to see how much he understands the unprecedented role Paul played in helping to move the conservative movement in Mississippi to where it is today. Richard knows he has big shoes to fill. In fact, I don't think you will see him trying to fill them, as that's not possible, and Richard knows that. Instead, Richard will create something new while honoring Paul and demonstrating how much he learned from him over the years. Throughout my career in media, I found that the sports professionals are among the smartest in my companies. Richard is among the best of the best in sports, but he also follows politics and current events like a sports enthusiast. He's a product of Mississippi whose career in media has uniquely positioned him for this moment. I can't wait to watch Richard's ascension. He is already a force and will become one to be reckoned with. I really believe that, Richard. And I think you're the man for the moment.
By the way, I might could use an agent, and if you're going to write like that and say those nice things, maybe I need to hire you. Wow, thanks, man. That's really.
Listen,
really
I spent a long career in media, working with a lot of really smart people. I've had the opportunity to work with Pulitzer Prize winners, and I know talent when I see it. And you're going to be unique in your approach, and it's going to be so interesting to watch you grow. But you hit the ground running. It's amazing how fast you hit the ground running, isn't it?
Well, Ricky, I appreciate all the things you said. That first of all is very kind. I think the thing that gives me a chance for this to go well is I'm naturally curious. Like I like talking to people. I like learning about new subjects. I was not the best student in school. And it's because I wasn't necessarily driven with, whatever the subject area was. But I have found in my professional career, whether it's, getting ready for a ball game that I'm going to announce or hosting Sports Talk Mississippi for all these years or now transitioning into this new role in the mornings on Super Talk, I'm genuinely curious about people and their stories, and in this role, how those stories affect Mississippi. How, good, bad, and otherwise for our state. And I think by being curious and by being interested in other people's stories, it has given me the ability to ask questions, sometimes probing questions, sometimes uncomfortable questions, sometimes questions that are just very surface level, to try and understand issues and go from there. I don't know if that's exactly what you're getting at, but I do think it's something that has allowed me to enjoy a lot of different things also along the way.
You know, one of the things I shared at Paul's memorial was what he said about if you find something you love doing, you'll never work a day in your life. You have to bring that kind of drive and passion into work like this, because it's interesting. It's not just entertaining people, and Paul would often just give a nod to the fact that he's an entertainer, but he understood at a deeper level. He was about communicating in a way that could bring Mississippi to a better place. And he really believed that. You could hear it over and over again through all these different angles. And I said that, one of the most powerful parts was to hear a couple of Democrats to speak to their relationship with Paul. Yeah. It is magic when you can do that. And the outcome of you urging others to change in a positive way, at least what you believe is a positive change, is there's a mission attached to that entertaining. And I think you get that, don't you?
I hope so. I certainly hope that's the case. In terms of what I'd like to accomplish with the show moving forward, the Mornings with Richard Cross, I want us to have a good time. I want people to be entertained. I want them to have a reason to turn on the radio when they're, getting ready for work or getting ready for kids to go to school, or they're on the way to school or on the way to work in the mornings, not just for it to just be filler in the background. I mean, I realize that that's part of it. You get in the car and you got lots of stuff going on and you flip on the radio and maybe you hear something and maybe you engage, maybe you don't. But if it can be more than just background noise, then I think that's a good thing. So we want to entertain. We want to inform. We want to laugh a little. We'll be serious when we need to be serious. But we're not going to try to not – I say we. I'm not trying to talk in third person here. I'm going to try and not take myself too seriously or the job too seriously for 3 hours a day. I'd go crazy if I was doing that. We got to have some fun. But I don't like being silly either. So it's like there's kind of a balance there. I said in the press release that SuperTalk released that Paul Gallo created what talk radio is supposed to be at its best. You connect with people, you connect with listeners, you're respectful to guests, you have interesting content, you try to be compelling as a host, and you try to have good guests that add to the conversation. And I realize that's a lot. And some of that kind of sounds like stuff that you just write on a whiteboard. But in terms of trying to figure out what I want the show to be over the course of an extended period of time, that's kind of the starting point for me.
What's interesting about SuperTalk, Richard, and you and I have had conversations about this before, and I have done almost entire shows about it, is that you think about SuperTalk Mississippi Media, this multimedia company, with a growing digital business. All of those things are true. And what I like to say at the end of that is simply that where radio is still king, because the relevancy of our radio programming has kept SuperTalk on the cutting edge as it relates to that. But the ability to go into these other platforms, whether it be podcast or whether it be Facebook or YouTube or X or TikTok, whatever it might be, it's a way to extend the voice of SuperTalk, in some cases maybe to new generations. I mean, you think about the demographics and the opportunity to broaden the demographics. There's a real opportunity for you there, and I'm excited about that opportunity for you.
I am too. I really am. And, it's about connection. It's about connecting with the listening audience all across the state of Mississippi. What we do, the platform that we have is so unique. I've talked with some people, and it may have been something that Paul talked with you about in a conversation that you guys had a little while ago, a few months back. And that's that I don't know that there is another place in the United States that has what we have in Mississippi. Obviously, you have major markets all over the country. The reach of WABC in New York is massive. The reach of WSB in Atlanta is huge. Those are major metropolitan areas. Mississippi doesn't have that. And yet we've been able to tie the entire state together with a population of nearly 3 million through a dozen radio stations where everybody, whether you're in, Hattiesburg or Greenville or Corinth or Oxford or anywhere in between, everybody's hearing the same thing. Everybody's getting the same message. And so it ties us all together. And I think that makes what we do so incredibly unique.
It does, man. At a time when radio companies across America are moving everything to some sort of national footprint where local programming is essentially dead, Steve Davenport went a different direction. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Richard Cross. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. In fact, at the second half of the show, Melanie Clark, who's a longtime volunteer in Ocean Springs, is going to be joining me. I can't wait to catch up with her. I love spending time with people in the trenches that are working to build better communities, and Melanie is one of those people. So we're going to continue our conversation with my friend Richard Cross, who's now has a program in the slot that used to be the Gala Show. Richard Cross, Mornings with Richard Cross. Richard, when you think about the national political dynamics and then how that sometimes transfers to the state level, there's so many layers to that. I mean, you couldn't have picked a more dynamic moment to go into this position.
When I started filling in for Paul, when his illness set in around the beginning of October, I felt like I was handed a little bit of a gift in that, not that any of these things are necessarily good. You had a presidential election that was absolutely on fire in the final month and a half of the campaign. You had Russia, Ukraine still going on, the flare up in the Middle East in the Gaza Strip area with Israel and Hamas. We had 2 hurricanes, major flooding. It's like the avalanche of information was just constant. And oh, by the way, it was in the middle of a college football season that was as hot as it could be in the state of Mississippi. Just a lot going on, and Mississippians are passionate, and I think we have an audience that cares about what's happening domestically, nationally, that cares about what is happening internationally, but always wants that to tie back into Mississippi. And when you're in a red state like we are, a diverse state, but a red state nonetheless, I think the things that are happening nationally are interesting. I think, the numbers tell us that there's a majority of Mississippians that kind of look at the world in a specific way, but that doesn't mean that we don't have varying opinions and we don't have different thoughts about the way things affect us and the way things that affect our family. I've tried to make this make sense in my head and make it make sense to listeners as well, but I genuinely believe that all politics are local. The things that happen in your local city council, with your local board of aldermen, with your local mayor's office, those affect your day-to-day life on a level that maybe what's happening on the other side of the world doesn't. But that doesn't mean you're disconnected from what's happening with the rest of the world. And so we want to always try to tie whatever story it is that we're looking at back to Mississippi, to Mississippians, to how it matters to us. And as we have moved from kind of the national scene with the presidential election into this legislative cycle in the state of Mississippi, man, the stuff that we're talking about matters. It matters a lot, whether it's school choice or tax reform and the debate about how to eliminate state income tax and reduce taxes for Mississippians, or making sure that mothers who are having babies have more time off to care for their newborns, whatever the issue is, or getting wine shipped to your home as opposed to only being able to go to the liquor store. There is stuff constantly that matters to us on a local level that's also relevant nationally.
Well, listen, as a former publisher, I can absolutely assure you that the majority of people want to get along. No matter what their political beliefs are. I think the majority of people are near the middle, center right or center left. And they're sick of watching what happens on the national level and how polarizing it has become. And they hope that that doesn't translate to Mississippi. An example, and you already spoke out on this, but when Governor Tate Reeves didn't have fond things to say about Jeremy England for wanting to do early voting, and the way he did it is so disappointing. And I've seen hardcore Republicans have issues with how that was handled, especially given that Jeremy is incredibly respected. I've had hours of conversation with Jeremy on this show. He supported a change in the state flag. He's been willing to go against the grain when it's the right thing for Mississippi. And it's interesting to watch that play out, because what happened in that case was the governor sort of projected the national polarization on Mississippi, and a lot of people pushed back on it. Joel Carter Jr. actually went before the Senate and spoke about it. You wouldn't have seen that a couple of years ago. I'm glad to see it, and I think that's a good sign.
Well, and part of the reason you wouldn't have seen that a couple of years ago is Governor Phil Bryant, Governor Haley Barbour would have never engaged in the rhetoric that Governor Reeves did. And look, I think Tate Reeves has done a ton of good for the state of Mississippi. I just want to see us celebrate that good and not, fight amongst ourselves as to, who's the most Republican or who's the most conservative. Let's get good policy. Let's get good legislation in place for the future of Mississippi. You brought up something else, though, Ricky, that I've said on a number of occasions. I am so proud to have grown up here, for this to be my home. I am proud that I'm a product of public education in Mississippi. Oxford, where I grew up, is a diverse place, like much of Mississippi is. The Oxford School District does not have a majority race within the district. There's nobody. You probably on the surface would think that white people make up more than 50% of the population, and that's just not true. It's a melting pot of white, black, Hispanic, Asian, different backgrounds, different socioeconomic things. But the way that people outside of Mississippi project what Mississippi is more times than not simply false.
Right.
There is no running from, I guess to put it nicely, a checkered past. I mean, we certainly have our scars. We certainly have our bruises. We certainly have things that we're not proud of. But I would put race relations in Mississippi up against race relations in any state or any country in the entire world. Why is it? Why is it that it works? My argument is we live together, we work together, we play together, we are on sports teams together, and we have figured out how to just respect each other, even though we're different. And the fact that we've gone through hard times in our state's past, I think has made us stronger. Now, are there exceptions to the rule? Of course, there are exceptions to every rule. But the idea that Mississippi is this backwater place where black people hate white people and white people hate black people, it just couldn't be any farther from the truth. And I will argue that until I don't have a breath left in my body. I am so proud of what we are in terms of the way we get along and the way we live together here.
Yeah, listen, I can't agree more. And I have said it so many times that when we leave, as I mentioned during Paul's memorial, we do carry a burden to dispel those myths. And I think Paul lived that every day. He lived it in his relationship with Robert Johnson, who on policy could not have been more different than Paul. But they were able to come together. And I think, that example, that relationship is an example of so many relationships like that play out every single day. And I think people who come from other places to Mississippi and see it with their own eyes, they're drawn to it. There's something about seeing what is in the heart and soul of Mississippians and it being so different than the narrative that they somehow came to understand because they really never took the time to see it for themselves. And now they do. And you can't, there's no turning back once you see it with your own eyes.
Well, and once you're part of a team, and not to make this a sports conversation, but I think about the time that I played high school football a long time ago in a public school setting in Oxford. I don't see all the guys that I played high school football with all the time, but when I do, it's almost like we've never missed a moment. And if teammates that I was with that when we look in the mirror, we don't look the same, right? We don't have the same skin color. We don't have the same background, whatever it is. We got teammates that if they called up out of the blue and like, hey, I know I hadn't seen you in a long time, but I need help with this. What do you need? Let's do it. Let's get it done. And maybe we need to rally other teammates together to take care of something. That's what happens when you're part of a team, and you push all the other stuff away, stuff that divides us, and it's all about kind of a common goal. And I don't see that there's any reason that can't exist in other areas of our lives outside of team sports.
I agree. The other thing is when a Katrina happens or a major tornado happens or a flood happens, it's another opportunity for us to see what is in the heart and soul of Mississippians. You see all the politics goes to the wayside, and all people really care about is helping their neighbor. And there throughout the history of Mississippi, there's case after case after case after case of it not mattering what color you are or where you come from or who you love or what you practice in terms of religion. It's people come together and they love each other and they help each other, and we're lucky to have that in our past. I'm absolutely confident in that. Richard, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Always enjoy visiting, Ricky. Thanks for reaching out. Appreciate all you're doing in coastal Mississippi, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Listen, I meant it when I said you're a force already, but you're going to be a force to be reckoned with in this new position. And I look forward to continuing the conversation, my friend.
Absolutely.
When we come back, I'll be joined by Melanie Allen. We'll see you after this.